I am really excited about tonight and about the panel that we have here today. My name is Tom Steinmetz. I'm the CEO here at Washburn Center for Children. And for me, this is really fitting that we're having this conversation tonight because this month is Mental Health Month. On the 9th of May, we celebrated Children's Mental Health Day. And, you know, childhood trauma and mental health challenges, that's everything that we do. It's why we exist. And the panel that we have here tonight, I'm really, really thrilled to dive in and hear from them. What I'm really excited about, this is the second year of our Children's Mental Health Speaker Series. And one of the things we really talked about for tonight is there is an overwhelming amount of information out there about all of the damage, the effects, the impact of early mental health experiences, and especially early traumatic experiences, both on children's immediate health and development, but also the profound lifelong impact it can have on kids. That's real, it's important, we need to pay attention to that, but we really specifically and deliberately wanted to keep the focus of tonight and of the whole series for this year on what have we learned about what best helps children heal from those experiences. So as we talk tonight, we're really going to keep the emphasis on that. What have we learned? What are we doing right now? And what are the folks from all of the organizations represented here tonight doing in their daily practice to help kids and families recover and heal and thrive after they've experienced overwhelming and stressful and traumatic experiences earlier in life. So welcome, I'm thrilled everyone is here. And so to get started, we have one panelist who's still on the way. So hopefully Sandra from NAS will be here soon. But I'm going to quickly walk through and do a brief introduction of our panelists, and then I'm going to kick it off with a few questions to get them started and to get our conversation going. The other thing I just want to emphasize before I get started, we really want this to be an open, interactive dialogue. So at any time, if you have ideas, thoughts, questions that you want to throw out, raise your hand, throw them out. We really want to have this be a dialogue and a conversation. So here is our group for tonight. Just going in the order that it's on my page. Katrina Cisneros is a faculty member at the University of Minnesota School of Social Work. And Katrina has years of experience both locally and internationally in Mexico, Venezuela, and Argentina in community organizing, therapeutic work, program development, teaching, and outreach. Dr. Mary Beth Zabul. Dr. Mary Beth.
You're really good.
Dr. Mary Beth is the medical director for child and adolescent psychiatry for Allina Health, one of the largest healthcare systems in the state. Dr. Mary Beth's philosophy is treating the whole child and their family using evidence-based interventions, including psychopharmacology and integrative treatments, which I'm really excited to hear more about. She has also been our partner in an innovative new project we've developed that connects our crisis stabilization services with emergency department and inpatient units in the Allina system. That's been a really wonderful new innovation. Jetton White, community wellness consultant and manager for the Northside Achievement Zone. Jetton works hand-to-hand with partners, families, and scholars to understand their needs related to conflict, social emotional development, safety, and other wellness concerns. Jetton began her work at NAS in 2012 as a family achievement coach, working to increase parent engagement and boost scholar outcomes. Jetton is also a brilliant presenter. She led an incredible workshop here last summer and facilitator who does extensive consulting, coaching, and training with several Northside partner organizations. Rudy Russo is the clinical manager for the Wilder Foundation's school-based mental health program. And Puhui Yang was originally going to be presenting. Rudy is filling in for her. And I have to just share what Puhua said to me because I thought it was such a wonderful introduction. Puhua wrote, "Rudy is a huge pioneer in our field, has certainly been a mentor to me, and is responsible for growing our school-based mental health programs, particularly our culturally based programs for African American and Hmong kids and families. He has mentored generations of providers and was recently recognized by the Association of Black Psychologists for his contributions to the field. So I'm thrilled to have Rudy here as well. And then Jenny Britton, the original Jenny Britton, is Washburn Center's Director of Child and Family Services. And like me, Jenny started here as an intern longer ago than either of us care to remember. Jenny is a talented therapist, trainer, consultant, supervisor, and she is also a huge believer in meeting families where they are, both clinically and physically. Jenny's trained in EMDR, and she is really our in-home therapy guru. So I'm ecstatic and thrilled that all of you are here with us tonight. And now I get to step back and shut up and throw out a few questions to get started. So to kick things off, I wanted to invite our panelists to introduce themselves and just give a 2 to 3 minute description of why you care about children's mental health, and specifically this topic of helping children and youth heal from trauma. And one thing your organization is currently doing to help children heal that you're the most proud of. Whoever's got a mic, take it away.
Absolutely. Try this.
Give it a second.
You can hear me now. I can hear me. What a joy to be here. And my first time in this building, I have to applaud Tom and his staff. I felt welcomed coming here. My name is Rudy Russo. I'm a 68-year-old Negro child of the South, segregated South, who emerged to and arrived many years ago to welcome, embrace, have pride about being African descended, of course dragging along with that the Iberian Peninsula. I'm married to the daughter of the Holocaust, and my bringing that forward is really going to be part of a core message that I wish to bring into this conversation this evening, that my lived experience, which is certainly betrayed by my light-skinnedness in my life here in Minnesota, 45 years, and my formative years in the South, and what I experienced as a young boy, has really formed, shaped, and affected the work that I've been doing for the last 40 years. I've been on the faculty and the staff of the Wilder Foundation for 39 years, been in private practice for 42 years. And some of my most exciting work and my life experiences, and who said a picture is worth 1,000 words? It actually defies words. This is a picture of early years programming called Project Kofi that I helped start in 1991. These are our boys. It was dedicated to holding precious and trying to save the lives of young African-American males in the St. Paul public schools, many of whom were in the bowels of special ed and persisted in being there. Another major part of my work, which I'm retiring in 2 years, which would be 42 years at Wilder almost, is growing staff that looks like this. And this is some of my earliest staff. So the work that I've been doing, and the most satisfying part of my work at Wilder for the last 29 years, has been to grow a model of service that I called culturally narrated school-based mental health. Some of us called or referred to it as culturally responsive or culturally affirmative. But in my 68 years of life, my ancestors speak to me, and they speak to what has saved my life, along with numerous other things. And so it's been a joy to grow from a small program at Maxfield Elementary to now 21 schools and 21 staff, 80% of whom look like this. So there's a cultural match there. I'm a strong believer, though not exclusively, that if you walked in the culture and lived that culture, along with numerous other qualifiers, you may be the best at doing this work. it's been a joy growing that, and it's been very much like trying to grow okra. My southernness is going to come out in the middle of winter in Minnesota. It's been a journey and a joy, and the Wilder Foundation has been a blessing to me to be a part of.
Okay, looks like I lost the toss here. Okay, so my name's Mary Beth Zabul, as Tom said, and he said it perfectly correct. And the reason why that is an odd name is because it's a Spanish-Filipino name. But you said it very correctly. My dad's from the Philippines. And talk a little bit about experience. My dad actually grew up during the Japanese occupation of Manila during the World War II. And I never really thought about that, about how he lived in the world, but he was like always worried about everything, and I didn't understand that at the time, but now I just understand he was a bit hyper vigilant. So he always thought that something was going to happen to any of us, you know, when we were out riding a bike or things like that. And I'm only reflecting upon that recently, actually. So you write good provocative questions on me some, but I didn't really intend to be a psychiatrist at all. I didn't really even intend to be a doctor. I actually was really into biology, loved biology. And I said, Dad, no way, I am not going to medical school. You must be kidding. So I ended up going to graduate school for ecology, which turned out to be perfect because it's all about systems and relatedness and how every organism is dependent on every other one. So that is a perfect segue into child psychiatry, because every family, every community, we all depend on each other. We're interdependent. And that's a big thing that I like to think about in the world as it is today, that we really have to think about things differently. So one of the things that I really get passionate about is working in systems and really realizing that working within a confined health system is not the answer to mental health. And actually, I can get up on a soapbox and say, this is a public health crisis. Children's suicides, children's mental health, we have to do something differently. So that is my passion, and to really, you know, some people get frustrated when they work in large health systems, but I really think we have to stay within large health systems to make the change happen. So that's a passion. The other passion I have is, yes, I'm a psychiatrist, and yes, I prescribe medicine, but that is not the be-all and end-all. I really, truly feel there has to be so many other interventions, and medications are not for everyone. They're really beneficial for some, but I really think that we have to do many other treatments and many other interventions in a larger system, you know, going from the child to the family, to the school, to the community, to the state policies. How are we funding our mental health care in the state of Minnesota? To national politics, to world, global views of immigration, climate change, all these things that affect all the way down to the children and the families. And I also practice non-Western medicine because that is another modality that works so well. So I practice acupuncture and do some mind-body stuff like Jenny does, EMDR. I'm trained in hypnosis. So there just have to be other things. So that's my passion. So now it's your turn.
Can you hear me? Awesome. I am Jetton White. You guys are awesome. You guys are awesome. I'm Jetton White. I work for the Northside Achievement Zone, or NAZ. I, again, am the community consultant, which is a role I'm really proud of. And then they tagged me, my boss is in the audience somewhere, with this manager role. I'm proud of that, too. And you asked some really good questions. And one of the questions you asked, I was asked the other day, sort of kind of, we were in a community conversation around the expectation of emerging violence in Minneapolis. And somebody said, well, what do you think is the problem? Which is kind of, I was like, oh, it's a good question. We're in Mental Health Month. Well, the problem is we don't have healthy children, and thus we don't have healthy communities. There are no healthy city blocks. The reason we don't have healthy children is because most of our mothers in our single-family homes are not healthy. They're mentally not well. They're physically not well. They're spiritually not well. And so when you don't have the tools yourself, right, to help your little one out with their anxiety, or even give words to that, then we have a health crisis, right? And I'm with you on that. And so that's one of the reasons I do the work that I do. And what's incredible, and the other part of your question that we get to do that I'm really excited about, is that we, when we used to come into schools, we'd be like, hey, we're here, we want to talk about mental behavioral health. And everybody get out there, all rosters and their cases, and like, we want to talk about this kid and this mom and that mom. We flipped that model. We're going in and pushing in with a wellness framework, and we're talking about the health of the adults that are supporting the children in those spaces. Are you well? Do you know the language of your emotions? Do you know what your emotions are telling you? Do you know when you showed up today dysregulated because your car broke down and you had to walk to work in the rain, that you dysregulated your entire class, and what that looks like? That little Johnny might not really be upset until he engages with you, and your body sends him a message that says he needs to be upset. So those are some of the things that we get to do that's really cool, and kind of really flipping the model when we're talking about wellness. So, and I'm thankful to be here today. Thank you, guys.
Hello, everybody. I'm also really excited to be here, and I'm so honored to be in the company of amazing colleagues and human beings. My name is Katrina Cisneros. I'm a clinical social worker, and I'm actually going to answer the last question you asked right now when you asked us to introduce ourselves. The reason that I care so much about children's mental health is because at one time I was a child and someone cared about my mental health. And so I love like this concept of what our lived experience and how that informs who we become and what we choose to do as our passion and our life's work. And so I didn't always know I wanted to be a social worker, but I sure am proud to be one now. And I have spent about half of my career dedicated to public child welfare, so working in systems, largely governmental systems, child protection, juvenile delinquency, and spent a lot of time then moving sort of into the nonprofit sector. And at one point, one of my mentors said, Katrina, you should really become a clinical social worker. And I said, I don't know how I feel about it. It feels sort of, it doesn't feel congruent with my values and the reason that I chose the profession. And this mentor said to me, Katrina, it's just one more way to help people heal. And when she said that, I could hear that. And so the last really 12 years of my career have been dedicated to working with under-resourced, chronically stressed families, primarily in the nonprofit sector, primarily in the Latinx community, and doing both outpatient mental health, in-home family work, clinical supervision, both individual and group. And then this position opened up on faculty at the university, and I thought, this is an amazing way to integrate all of this practice experience and this lived experience that I've accumulated in my journey working in the field with children and families in different communities across different states, across different systems. And so now I've been on faculty at the U for the last 2 years. And for me, I see so many of my students in the audience, and I'm so happy to see all of you. It is so inspiring to wake up every day and interact with people who share a passion, a dedication, and a vision for how we can do this work differently. And it's a gift to share my journey with people along their journey as they enter into this field to do this really, really hard work. And I think that there's a very academic understanding of what trauma is, of what children are, what the DSM qualifies as criteria. And then you have the heart piece, you have the heart work, and you have the lived experience that informs this beautiful congruence. And so to be able to share that with people who are entering the field has been nothing short of magical for me. So I'm really, really happy to be here tonight to share my experience and to also acknowledge and honor the experience in the room, because I'm a firm believer that there are always more knowers in a space than just the people who are identified as the knowers. So I'm also excited to hear from all of you.
Hi, I am Jenny, the Director of Child and Family Services here at Washburn. In the family that I grew up in, my parents, lovely human beings, but feelings and vulnerability were just not a thing. So we didn't talk about them, we didn't name them, but I always knew there was more. There was something. I could feel it in my body, I could experience it, I had no idea what to do with it. And that's how a therapist is born. Because I was like, well, how do we understand all these things? I don't know what's happening, but I can feel them. I can feel them in my body. I know that something's going on for me. And I think that's how I slipped into being a therapist, but I didn't know it. One of my very favorite things about being at Washburn and something about being in the field, I love co-creating things with other people. I think when we join with families in their space and space where kids spend their time, their life, at home, school, community, we have an opportunity there to be with them in their space, to understand who they are, why they show up the way they do, and to join with them where they're at, their daily experience. What does that look like? And really honoring that families are, they know themselves so much better than I can know them. And in our work, we can co-create this beautiful relationship where I can, we can share with what we know about ourselves with each other. And to me, that's the beautiful part about being a therapist, is using our relationships as the conduit for healing and growth and love and acceptance, and being able to repair and create new relationships with clients and community members. So it's important for panels like this. It's important for us to be in spaces together for those of us that are passionate about children's mental health, because it does take a community of people to come together for us to be as helpful as we can.
Wow. Wow. So I'm really excited to get to do one more introduction before we move on to our next question. And hey, good to see you.
I was in the back for like 10 minutes.
We saw you.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm also really thrilled to welcome and introduce Sandra Samuels, who is the president and CEO and one of the founders of the Northside Achievement Zone. And NAZ is a collaborative of over 40 partner nonprofits and schools. Along with parents, students, partners, and staff, Sandra is leading a revolutionary culture shift in North Minneapolis, focused on ending multi-generational poverty through education and family stability. And the question we threw out to the panel to start with is if you can just start off and say a few words about why you care about the subject and the idea of helping children heal from traumatic experiences, and one thing your organization is doing right now that you're the most proud of to help with that.
Well, I'll start. The one thing that my organization is doing is Jetton White over there. Is this not on? Oh, there it is. The one thing is Jetton White. And so, I mean, you see what I'm saying? Drop the mic. I'm going home now. And I apologize for coming a little bit late. I'm a little bit, But anyway, so I am sitting here principally as a mother. And I am middle class, and my daughters grew up middle class. And each and every one of them has had their struggles with mental health. And they've given me permission to talk about it. In fact, one came on a radio show that my husband and I have called Power to the Parents. What we do today impacts who our children are tomorrow. 89.9 KMOJ, Sundays, 11:30. So, and they've given me permission, and there's an intersectionality in terms of the work that Jetton and I do, and that we're doing on the north side, and we're doing in schools, and I feel very connected to that as a mother, as an African-American mother who comes from a legacy of enslaved people. And I've wondered, like, my daughters have had everything. Like, why are they struggling with mental health issues so desperately? And in fact, my middle daughter, her role model is Jennifer Lewis. And Jennifer Lewis is the grandmother on Blackish. And if you've never seen Blackish, you gotta see Blackish. And Jennifer, the reason Jennifer is her role model is because Jennifer is very outspoken about her mental health issues. And she is bipolar, and she talks about her journey, and she's very vulnerable, and that's not something that we do. And we definitely don't do it in the Black community. And as I was struggling with why, like, we didn't beat you, I mean, like, it is, I wanted to, but we didn't. And, you've had everything, you have a car, I mean, it's like, what is happening? And then as I talked to other mothers, middle-class mothers, some of my white girlfriends as well, and their daughters' struggles, primarily daughters, but also sons. One of my, a good friend of mine, actually, who's staying with us, was here for therapy tonight. He came to see you, Jetton. Did you see him back there? So he was here for therapy. He lives with me too. So it's like all the kids in my house are going a little, but I know Sante, she said Jennifer is her role model because she talks so openly about it. And then I started talking to my cousins, all females, and again, descendants of enslaved people, sharecroppers, who went through, and again, you don't talk about this in our community. And we all are realizing that we ourselves didn't talk about our own depression. Because you don't get depressed. You're a black woman, you just get up and you do what you need to do. And have an attitude while you're doing it, right? And hold in all of that stuff. All of the stuff that has come through your DNA, all of the stuff that you currently experience and you see in your family, with your friends, the legacy of it, plus the present day. And finally, you know, we started talking. I told my daughter I struggle too. But it was her coming out that gave me the courage to also talk about my own challenges. And so I know one of my best friends committed suicide when I was in the Peace Corps, just very close to me. A very close friend recently committed suicide. Sorry, did I say committed suicide? Died by suicide. And even understanding the difference, right? And so I feel as though this is the issue of our day, and there's a lot that we can do.
Thank you, Sandra. I don't know about anybody else, but everything we're talking about hits close to home. And I just want to invite, I think one of the things we can do together is help to hold this together. And if you notice some of those feelings of tightness or constriction or fear or anger or grief, we're all here together. We're here with you. Just try to breathe through it and hold it, and we'll keep going and keep talking. I think 4 times in the last 2 weeks, I've gotten calls from parents basically saying, my kid is struggling. I'm terrified. I don't know what to do. I don't know what's going on, but they're hurting. Like, what do I do? And so the first question I want to throw out to the group, and maybe what we'll do is popcorn around, and I'll just pick on somebody first to kick things off so we don't do the pass the mic thing. So Katrina, I'll throw this one out to you first. There are some things we know. Dr. Mary Beth, I think you touched on this. We know there are some terrifying realities. Suicide rates among kids 10 to 17 have gone up by 70% over the last decade. There's no arguing with that. But there's also, I think, a lot of confusion and discussion about how much are the actual rates going up among kids? Is it really that more kids are truly struggling with anxiety, with depression, and experiencing traumatic events? How much of it is that there's maybe less shame and stigma? More people, more families are starting to step up and talk about it and get help. So the question I want to throw out to the group and throw out to you first is, we continue to see all these reports on the media and the news and in reports about all this. What factors do you see that are contributing to these increases?
Well, I think it's a both and. And I think I just want to acknowledge and honor your statements about your lived experience and also the experience in the community. And I think one thing that's really important to name is that mental health, especially in children and families, is a racialized issue. And I think oftentimes we want to pretend that it's not, and we want to talk about youth or we want to talk about kids. But the fact of the matter is that mental health is experienced differently by different groups, different communities. Service delivery is different, accessibility is different, barriers are different, and so we're not operating in a utopia in which there is sort of this equitable playing field that we're assuming that we're all kind of standing on to begin with. And so to answer your question, I think there is just some recent research out about, black children ages 5 to 12 are actually now experiencing suicide at 2 times the rate of white children. Now, suicide has oftentimes been kind of coined as something that's more predominant in white communities, but if you actually look at some of the research coming out right now, it's actually quite terrifying. I'm going to say that again. 5 to 12-year-old black children have 2 times the rate of suicide. And so, I think it's important to acknowledge, the racial disparity in some of the experience of mental health and also treatment and service delivery regarding it. And so, when I hear that question, the word that comes to my mind and to my heart about why is disconnection. That we are, I think pervasively living in a marinade that is predominantly moving us more towards a level of disconnection. I think disconnection means, looks, and feels different depending on who you are in the world and what your lived experience is. But when I sit up here, I have the privilege to sit up here. I'm sitting up here in accountability to all the children and the families that I have worked with, that have shared their stories with me and their suffering with me, who aren't up here. And one of the themes, as I'm seeing these faces of these children and families that I have been privileged to walk with, is that there is a level of disconnection that has caused a sense of suffering. And we could chicken and egg that probably all day. In the end, I also sort of think, does it matter? Does it matter if, we're just seeing more, incidents of mental health because there's less stigma? Or is it actually that, at the end of the day, I just think that there's a level of suffering that requires some responsiveness, and just want to highlight that it's experienced in different ways by different kids and families. So I don't know if I even answered that, but
You did.
just
You
say I
answered it
did.
beautifully.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Just
Thank you. And Sandra, you've got the mic, so you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Yeah, and I know that part of the disconnection is definitely the availability of social media. And so, in the past, when I was growing up, I turned 16 before I had a phone in my room, and then it was only, it was the dial, and then you could only talk certain amount of time. I didn't know who was going to what party, and that I wasn't invited. My daughter actually looks at Instagram. I remember last year, and everybody was taking the selfies of their prom dress, and nobody commented on her prom dress. And that sent her into a spiral. It wasn't even that somebody said something negative. It was that they said nothing at all. And then, you heap all of the insecurities that you have as a child, and then she is an African-American young girl in a very white school, in a very white world. And so you put the layers, and this is the race, how it gets racialized. You put the layers on it, and don't let a couple comments be said, and then it becomes even deeper. But part of the disconnection is I don't have to look at you anymore. I can just be mean and say whatever or say nothing at all through social media. And I think it is a huge, it is not the devil, but close.
Can you hear me okay? I totally agree with what you're saying. I actually just pulled an article, because that's what I like to do. I like to look up data. But there was and I know that's weird, but about 94% of teenagers are on social media, and 85% say they're in constant contact on the social media. I mean, that was just a little astounding number to me. And I would like to say that we were talking right before we started. We do it too. So how do we show that we can put down the phone? And I talk to families a lot. When you have a dinner, everyone put down your phone, and you have to tell the parents that as much as the kids. And I'll also say that part of the concern that I have about suicide, it's no longer an isolated event. when one happens, everybody knows about it. It's everywhere, and even if it's not in your community, you hear about other suicides, and we know there's clusters of suicides in communities and schools, and I think it's partially because the kids feel like they really know that other kid, even if they've never met them, they know them from social media. So it's as if it's so much closer to us than it's been in the past, and that's a concern. So.
I'm gonna touch and agree and say we as humans are too attached to our cellular devices. I was just telling Sandra the other day that I made this rule at my house where I don't touch my phone before 9 a.m. I might start working at 8, but I'm not going to look at my email or check a text or call anybody or check nothing till about 9 o'clock. And then by 9 o'clock at night, if you call me after that, you're not going to reach me.
Yep, I did the other night.
Yeah. Hey, that's my CEO. That's my CEO. I'm going to answer. That's the exception. My watch told me Sandra's calling. You better answer. I was like, oh, excuse me a minute. But I have these boundaries. But I say that to say a couple of things. One, I was just telling them that it's hard. I wanna check my phone, and it's not even about Facebook. I want to make sure I didn't miss an important email, or did my mom need something, or my sister's pregnant right now. Like, is she comfortable? Like, I felt like I was missing something, and I often wonder, like, is that the anxiety, the angst that's built up in our scholars? And if I'm an adult and I know how to name it, call it, tell myself not to do it, and if they don't have the tools, then how do they know how to do it? They don't know anything else then but to grab their phone, right? The other day, my daughter was Snapchatting from the moment we got in the car in the morning to go to school till I dropped her off. I was like, isn't everybody at school? Turn that thing off, right? To answer the question, why, I too, and I've shared this with a couple of people, and I have my daughter's permission as well, is we've struggled with suicide in my house the last couple of years, actually. And I might get a little emotional. When my daughter, and this is the why, we adults, I think this is part of a why. We as adults, and especially the caretakers of the children, have to do a better job of slowing ourselves down and actually hear what the child is trying to communicate to us. And so when she came to me after she attempted to hurt herself. And she literally ran to me to my room, which is only a few feet from her room. And she said, "Mom, I just tried to kill myself." And one of the things I really pride myself on, and for those of you who know me, know that, is really being in tune with my feelings and my emotions and my thoughts, and being pretty much regulated during most of the day. And in those few moments, I literally lost it. And I said to myself, that's okay. She needed to know I heard her, right? If I had hardened up or done something in response, like where I'm from Little Rock. And so a couple of things we didn't do growing up is we didn't cry. Number one, as a black woman, you don't cry. You suck it up. And number two, we would never talk about hurting ourselves. That's for weak-minded folk. I literally mean it the exact way I said it. That's for weak-minded folk. What my daughter was saying to me that night, it was, I need you. I didn't need to ask a bunch of questions. I didn't need to ask why. What I needed to do was listen. And so I found her a really good therapist. And we went to therapy, and I got invited into the conversation, which I thought was baffling that a teenager would call me into their therapeutic session. And we got a few things resolved and got a plan, right? And she feels safe now, which is a big deal for me. I had to make some adjustments. I had to listen in therapy to some really hard conversations, some things that I thought I woulda, coulda, shoulda known, and I didn't. And I really know my children. There were some things she said in there that I had to go, okay, that's where we're at. Now, what can I do? And allow her to tell me what she needed for me to do, and do it consistently, right? When we don't listen to our kids, these are the results. If nobody's hearing them at school about bullying, somebody needs to hear them at home, right? I don't care if it's the neighbor. Allow that to happen. But I think part of the why is the adults need to just listen better.
When I think about there's so much to hold in context when thinking about this, and it really weighs heavy on my heart. Growing up, we lost a few people in our community to suicide, and I didn't understand that. And then I grew up in a house that didn't really talk about feelings, and then I went to college and found social work, and I was like, oh, I have feelings. I can understand these. That's like, I can do this. But one thing that I've noticed in trending now too is the sense of like immediate acknowledgement or gratification that social media has put into our world. And so if you need validation or an answer, right? Instead of researching at the library or wondering about something, you can find out really fast. And when kids are developing, they're risky sometimes. That's part of development. That's part of understanding who you are. That's part of understanding where you fit in the world, in the context of the world, how the world responds to you. And then you add sort of the immediacy of social media. And I don't even know what you call that. Like the word is like,
That's clinical. That's clinical. It's clinical. It's clinical.
Put it on the next DSM. So that's what happens. But there's a lot in there, right? And so there's a lot of people have access to our kids, have access to their voice, to responding to them, to understanding them. That's way outside of the people that love and take care of them every day. And so whatever that responsibility is we have as community members to think about how we engage with kids in social media or how we think about that. I don't know. It's a part of all of this. And I don't know how to get out of the immediacy that's out there in the social media world.
You can hear me. You may have noticed that I've waited to go last because the question of why often gets me in going down a rabbit hole that I've selected in my career to respect the why question. It is a piece of information that can be helpful. I've spent my career, though, trying to do something about it. I can't believe that this is the first time I'm sitting next or meeting Sandra, and that I'm not running away because Katrina, I'm from New Orleans.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm not running and hiding because of Katrina. My family was devastated by that. The why question, I do not want to sound disrespectful about why. It can give you a sense of highlighting what you need to do. I started Kofi chasing morbidities that African-American males were struggling with. And one of the biggest ones in Minnesota was homicides 30 years ago. And so I was like, I really want to immunize my brothers and sisters to homicide. And then the issues proliferated. It's kept me busy for 29 years and 30 years. I believe my work has been chasing after, running away, trying to mitigate stress. For me, it always comes down to how do we address what we all suffer in various degrees. I am a warrior against toxic stress. Some of us come into that by the coincidence of our birth and have to struggle with it. So I want to bring forward in this conversation tonight that race, that culture is my supraordinal variable. It begins and almost ends there. It has informed me of what I must do in my life and in my career. That race is minimally helpful, social cultural trauma, a rising construct that folks are now talking about, way younger than me. I have a group of beautiful, smart, and passionate young brothers and sisters on my staff who stay close to people like Ken Hardy, who bring that conversation to life with constructs that make such sense. That social cultural trauma, its consequences on us, needs to be a part of this conversation. I grew up suffering with it. I grew up battling it. And we need to bring that forward as the 10th ACEs. That is very important. It's not ever mentioned, but younger folk, though Ken and I are cohorts, age cohorts, I've discovered, he is lifting that along with some others in the conversation that must be a part of mental health conversations.
Thank you. Thank you. A lot of what people talked about feeds right into this next question. And especially for parents in the audience, we want to hear from you. And so this question is, what warning signs should parents, teachers, and other adults watch for? And if you see concerns, what's the first step? How can our kids and youth get help? Mary Beth, you want to take that one since you've got the mic?
I'll take the mic, but I actually think that everybody in this room, especially parents, already know some of the answers to these questions, because I would say that you know your kids better than I do, meeting them for the first time in the office. And what I always tell parents is there something different that you're noticing? Is there something that's outside of what they normally do? And then that usually starts the conversation. So to me, I really want to see, I want to hear from the parents that they think something is different. You know, it could be their sleep, it could be their appetite, it could be in teenagers, all of a sudden they're doing really high-risk behaviors. It could be that they're not checking their phone all the time at all, which is very concerning, right? So just something is different. So I'm sure other people can kind of chime in too. Or people in the audience could chime in.
While I wait on the audience to want to participate too. I agree, and I'll share that with my daughter in my own personal experience. I had noticed some things. She's a photographer, and every day after school was like, take me here, take me there. I want to take a picture of this. I want to take a picture of you there, this and that. And she likes to be in nature. She wants to be a therapist with her art. And then I had noticed, I had bought this fancy camera, you know, and I had noticed she wasn't using it, and she was really excited about it. And I was like, hey, what's going on? Is it broken? Because you know we can send it back. And she was like, no, I just don't feel like it. And there was a couple of days I kind of let that go as a parent, because you don't necessarily want to push too hard either, because that can send your kid off another way. So when I let that second day go by, that was when she decided that she didn't want to be here. And so had I just went with my gut, right, as a parent, especially as a mother, and fathers are very important, I'm not saying that, but as a mother, I held her like she was in me, right? And so there's a bond, and then I nursed her. We had skin to skin right away, and so we have a connection. And I didn't go with my gut. Go with your gut. That's your baby, which is what Dr. Mary is saying, right? Can I call you Dr. Mary? Awesome. Which is what Dr. Mary is saying, right? Right, and still being respectful. Did y'all catch that? So go with your gut. You're the expert. I know that sounds corny especially when you hear it from a school teacher. You're like, I'm my child's first teacher. Nobody has the intuition like a mother. Go with the gut.
I also want to just highlight that I think one of the gifts that mental health professionals bring to an assessment process is an understanding of what we kind of consider normal, neurotypical kind of child development. And so there's this intersection between knowing what, a quote-unquote typical or average 8-year-old should be doing, and then when you take that kind of understanding and context and you pair it with the family's lived experience of who this kid is and what feels different intuitively, because we know that things like trauma derail development. And so I think, when we can couple sort of what we understand about typical development and what children should be doing at different phases in their life, along with what a family is saying feels different or off, then we can really do a really nice assessment of, and it's one of the things I tell my students all the time. I teach a clinical practice with children and adolescents, and we spend half the semester learning neurotypical development, because you can't do a quality mental health assessment if you don't understand what children are capable or should be doing at different phases of their life. And so, I think when we can kind of pair those two pieces together, we can really help families identify what's going on and then figure out what to do about it. So
the other thing that I'll add is that, like trauma, how the person is experiencing the event or the feeling is the most important part. Not how, if we've decided that it's traumatic enough, or if we think the violence was violent enough, or if we think this situation was enough. It's more about how they perceive and understand what's happened to them from their perspective. And so it's important as adults to listen to what they're bringing into this space versus us saying like, yeah, earlier today I saw someone else and, you know, that seemed bigger or that seemed more scary. It's not about our perception of what feels scary. It's really about the person's perception of how they're experiencing what's happening for them.
I want to acknowledge Michelle Martin in the room back there. Hey, Mish. Michelle and I started working on the North Side like 15, 16 years ago together, and our children are the same ages, and we're real small, and now they're away at college. And I know we were real busy. We were real busy trying to build an organization, and I, you know, the thing that I know that I want to own and not have any shame about is that I actually did not know my daughter was depressed from the time she was 12. Right? I mean, so she's 20 now, and, you know, so to hear your child tell you that from the time she was 12, she was depressed, and that you as a parent didn't know it it's hard. And I know, again, I'm gonna get back to the racial piece, is that what the adult women in my family now are all coming together around is that not only did we suffer from depression, but then it was like, oh yeah, and when Aunt Mary drank all the time, yep, you know what, she was actually depressed. And then that one that we called Cray Cray, like she was actually depressed. And like we're starting, we have a language now. And so, you know, I think the number one thing that we can do is first, when the plane is in trouble, you put on your air mask first before you help your child. And I think the number one thing that we as adults have to do is start dealing with our own mental health, right? So that's one. And then two, in hindsight now I can see all the signs. And I know one of the first things was she had a radical shift in her weight at the age of 13, you know, and she, you know, was, beautiful, you know, Rubenesque, and then she was just skinny. But it's like, oh, good, now you're skinny, you know, and then dropping of grades. I'm just thinking, well, she's just going through teenage stuff, you know, and pulling back from relationships. I mean, now is so clear looking in the rearview mirror. But I think the number one thing we can do, and the reason I talked about Michelle and I is because, you know, a surefire way, if you want guaranteed depression, be guilty. Feel guilty. That, you know, so we were busy, we were working hard, we were trying to be good parents, you know, at the same time. But I know there was a weight of the community that I was carrying that I think sometimes didn't leave space for me to see what was happening with them. And whether that's that, or you work a lot, or you're passionate, you're an advocate, you know, you're a great, oh my gosh, social workers, I don't know how y'all do it. You know, you're carrying the weight of the world, you know, and do your own work. Be honest about your own mental health. Get your help, and then listen to other parents who tell you what signs they saw.
I'm going to try without that piece of equipment. Can you all hear me? Yeah. They tell me I have a big mouth in my work group. Recognition, self-awareness, psychoeducation, all of those are very valuable pieces. And then there's the river of denial. That is my story. And my point will be that we are all in this together, this observational piece. We're all a part of this community that my son, who there was no way my son had multiple learning disabilities and attention issues. But it was through my wife who kept prodding me. I'm a psychologist. Oh no. And others, on and on and on, who cared enough to say something's not developing in your son. 2 PhD programs at the University of Developmental Psychology at the Institute School of Psychology, not my son. My point is, the question of recognition or observation of what may be going on needs to be like a response to the community violence question. It's a community issue. My introduction to myself as a child of slavery, dragging Italy along with him, that's what my DNA suggested, married to a child of the Holocaust, was to really say, which I haven't until now, that all of our faiths are inextricably intertwined. So when I sit at home and I see the violence that exists in this community, I own it, and it gives me energy to try to continue to do something. I have nearly gotten in serious trouble stopping my car and getting in the midst of some trouble. I'm a little bit smarter now, but I try to make a little noise so that they know somebody's watching. I can't just pass that up on the street. So this observation of one of the issues I've had in my field, which, by the way, I have to admit to you, I've never fully known, being a Western-trained behavioral health specialist, it's never quite fit for me. I've always been about trying to, what works, what's the evidence, bringing that in. And the question of culture has been a partner to that. In social cultural trauma, racial trauma has been where I've found the greatest truth to go after problem solving, along with good medicine, other good medicine.
Thank you. Before we move on to the next question, I also just want to share a couple of my own thoughts with this, because this does hit close to home. I mean, Sandra, you touched on this. My guess is everyone sitting out there, if you think back a few generations in your own family, some of these same stories where you go, oh, that's what was going on. Or that secret, the thing that didn't get talked about, that you finally find out about later, those things come up. And the one other thing that I would say, speaking more as a dad, is that just like Jetton was saying, there's a part of it of don't ignore your gut. That's really true, and it's really real. And I also know for some of us, like myself, this is more true for me as well. You want things to be okay. You want your kid to be okay. You want things to be normal, and you can minimize and avoid things sometimes and just say, they're just 16. It's just a phase, all that stuff. I would also just ask and encourage people, first, talk to somebody that you trust, and not somebody who's just going to reassure you and say, oh, it sounds fine, everything's okay. Somebody you trust to tell you the real, honest truth. The other thing that you can do as well, there are some amazing resources out there now for the folks who like data, who are more analytical. Some of us, it's relationship-based. Some of it's there. There are amazing things out there. The Child Mind Institute, the Strengths and Difficulties Questionnaire. There are a bunch of things out there for free that if you want to just do a little of that reality test and say, what's going on? Is this something I should be a bit more concerned about? You can fill in a 5-minute questionnaire and at least get that initial sense. The other thing that you can do, if you don't have that person you can talk to, is reach out to any one of our organizations. We get thousands of calls every year just from parents calling to say, hey, can I talk this through with you? I don't know where to go. Sometimes they come here. A lot of times we connect them with someplace else, and I know every one of us does the same thing. there are a lot of people and places out there that can help you sort through those questions if you have them. Before we move on to our next question, I just want to pause and make sure if anybody, if you have a question, if you have a comment you want to share, I'll jump up and be Oprah or Phil Donahue, run over and share a mic so you can hear. I'm really kind of dating myself with that one. Thank you.
Should I stand up? Dr. Phil. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for all of your answers so far. They have been really vulnerable, and it's so meaningful to really sit in this space with you guys and hear stories that are so personal. And the one thing that really resonated with me was talking about social media, because it is kind of strange to be in a position where you talk about social media and its harms, and I think about the kids that I work with and the ways that I worry about them, but also I think about myself and my friends and the ways that we use social media. And it really made me wonder, how do you teach people lessons that you haven't quite figured out yourself? How do I tell kids to get off the internet when I spend hours a day on Instagram?
So I really love this question. I was just at one of our partner schools yesterday, and we were facilitating, and the group I put paper on everybody's table, but I didn't hand out pens, and I did that on purpose. These are all teachers. And so I said, who needs a pen? Just about everybody in the circle raised their hand. But these are teachers that expect students to show up, ready for class and ready to learn. And I said that. I said, and we expect our kids to show up with their backpack packed, their pens, paper, whatever, but we're not doing that thing, right? So I say that to say that you guys need to practice showing up to meetings prepared with a pen and a watch and your own pieces of paper. So you can't teach anybody anything until you've actually mastered it yourself, right? I can't come tell you about your feelings and behaviors and beliefs if I haven't checked my own first, right? All I'm doing is adding more garbage to your nervous system because I don't want it in mine, right? So you can't. That's the absolute answer. You can try it. I'm not sure what the repercussions will be, but you can definitely give it a shot. Our kids these days will tell you, but you do it.
I will jump on that totally too, because in the healthcare system, who is telling you what to do and how to take care of yourself? The doctors and nurses, do they take care of them? Are they taught how to take care of themselves? So I like to kind of go on, talk about resilience training and self-care for healthcare providers. How can we take care of others if we can't take care of ourselves? So, but yeah.
She really doesn't like social media either, by the way.
And it is hard. So I'm a mom to 3 boys, 11, 9, and 5. And my 11-year-old asked for a phone. And I mean, like our family for, I won't admit how many days, I mean, a long time. When we were having like this huge like family, like we were like in consistent like family meetings and like consultations. We called in like other people in our community who had parented children further along the way to try to, and my husband isn't born and raised in this culture or country. And so we also had within our own family system a divide about all of these decisions that we had to navigate as well. And so, and you know, even as a parent, you know, you read all these articles like this is just the way it is now. And so you can't be black and white about it. It's more about how to manage it and how to navigate it. But there's such an addictive quality to it that we're like 6 months into this, and oh boy, yeah, it's a whole different world, and it's like I wish that it was sort of like, oh, we've got this down now, but it's this constant renegotiation with ourselves, with who we want to be as a family, with our children, and then there's just this immense social and cultural pressure that our children are living in. You know, my son is one of the only children of color in his academic setting, and so to not have a phone was just a compounded factor on exclusion. and a feeling of acceptance. And so, we were sort of towing this line of, every family's different. They're not our family. That's not my child. But then you get to a point where you also realize that not having access or connection. So we talked about, I started talking about disconnection, and that social media and these devices are also a form of connection in some ways, and it's not all good and all bad. But, and so then we had, I had to really think about this as a mom about what does this mean? What is the social translation of having this device? And for him to not have it was adding a level of isolation that was, it didn't feel good for him. And so that adds another layer to the conversation that we're already kind of dealing with within the academic setting. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's like really complicated. If anybody here wants to write a book, I would more than likely buy it.
We had another question up here, and as I figured was going to happen, the time is flying. So I want to make sure we have a chance to hear from some more folks in the audience right here.
Mine's not really a question, but in the beginning, someone said the parents aren't healthy, the kids aren't healthy. Unless it's not okay. Could we talk? I do guardian ad litem work now. I'm a retired Minneapolis teacher. I have a 24-year-old couple who have 4 children. The oldest is 4. She doesn't have a clue. The kids have all been traumatized by, and it's not unique either. But can you give some perspective of what you're doing in your settings to reach parents who need so much, not just support, they need instruction. That's a terrible word for a teacher to use, but they need to learn different ways of doing things.
Thank you. Who wants to take that one first?
I can just say that I totally agree with you, and I actually feel like we really have to think about prevention and starting with parents, starting actually with people before they get pregnant. When they're pregnant made me think of Dr. Russo doing perinatal mental health, working with mothers that are pregnant and treating and assessing depression before delivery, after delivery, and then during early childhood work, which is really 0 to 3 work, early childhood intervention, mother-baby type of work, and they have some innovative programs in other cities. I don't know if we're there yet here in Minnesota, but I think that is a really important part. And one of the reasons why I became a child psychiatrist as opposed to an adult psychiatrist, because I wanted to do early intervention, because about half of all mental health disorders start by the time you're 14, about 75%, by the time you're 24. So why aren't we spending money on early childhood? And we know about the ACEs score. So I totally agree with you. And I would say that, one thing I've done at Alina is make sure that the family therapy pieces of the work with our intensive outpatient, partial, inpatient, the family working with the parents is essential. And they always adult folks don't quite get how important it is. And I think it's the most important thing that we do.
I'd like to offer something.
Can you use the
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. To answer part of your question, there's hardly an intervention, a point of contact with a client of mine or in my work group, even our school vendor services, that does not include the family, the caregivers. It must. And part of the trap of my younger trained professionals is thinking they actually can make a difference, some magical difference, by pulling kids into their office and doing some evidence-based work on them in the total absence of the caregiving environment. And you already heard me say that that caregiving environment includes all of us in this room, the community. It takes patience. My practice, early training was in family systems. And so there was hardly a family I didn't work with that as well included videotaping the session for them to see their relationships, but it must extend to all the caregivers in their lives, and a whole lot of patience and relationship work.
I want to, something you said, it just kind of has really tugged at my heart around that, that it really is about the community. So it's not just the parents can't do it alone. So it is us all understanding our role in the mental health of our children, and understanding that they are all our children. And that's why what the partnership that we have in schools, working with teachers, nobody has our babies longer than teachers, you know, and early childhood providers, and, you know, just all of the adults that touch our children in so many different ways. I think we need a revolution around understanding the science and intervention and the warning signs and what's working. I know one of the things that we do at NAS is that we focus a lot on parenting education and standing beside our parents. And our parents, we have about 1,100 parents. 79% of them are African American, 98% parents of color, 73% make $30,000 or less. Many have been impacted by historical, persistent, institutional, racialized trauma, you know, and so the parenting education classes, I tell you, we have a number of curricular offerings, but one, and they all touch, from college-bound babies, where for parents who have children 0 to 3, we talk about the importance of taking care of themselves and nurturing and, you know, all of this stuff, and it's done in community. That's the other thing. We don't need to fix parents. We need to set up a context for them to come together, you know, with the right support and understanding who they are, and share wisdom and share knowledge, and actually ask them and understand and believe that they have some, you know. And anyway, so college-bound babies, and then but one is an empowerment class. And it's 8 weeks long, and it's really about emotional intelligence and dealing with their own core hurts. Hurt people, right? And so I find the class one of the most powerful things we do, and it's like, and I'm a woman of faith, and when I go occasionally, I feel like, all right, I'm good. I don't need church for a couple months. Like, this is it. Like people actually being real around their struggles and what it is like to be a person of color, in our context, an African American in this community, and really addressing kind of historical and present day, and you'll hear parents. So they're doing their own work. And on our radio show, Power to the Parents, we often, my husband and I, love a program by a doctor named Dr. Ron Ferguson, and he runs the Achievement Gap Initiative at Harvard University, and we've actually had Dr. Ron on and Skyped him into our show, but he has something called the Boston Basics, like 5 things parents of children, young and toddlers, and, you know, younger kids, but a lot of it works for all, that they are invited to do with their children. But one of the first things is maximize love and manage stress. And they spend a lot of time on that. And so you want to talk about toxic stress? Like, you know, actually starting to have the conversation and them understand where some of that pain is coming from, and so that they don't play it forward. And understanding how their own stress levels and the cortisol in their bodies impacts their child. You know, so all of this, we know the science, we know what works. We actually have to create conditions for parents, for the entire community, to actually start implementing that together and learning from each other. But we've seen some parents just really transform.
I just want to acknowledge the fact that I think it's important to name the fact that we're also operating within a behavioral health system, which is a medical model, which is a very white dominant model that is constructed around what's a problem, what's the solution. And so, I think when we look at this third-party billing, like insurance dominates a lot of times access to service, who has access to insurance, what we can bill and what we can't. And as a clinician in the field, I was always surprised as new clinicians would come into the places that I was providing service, and it was sort of like no one wants to work with families. Everybody is trained to work with children, or I work with adults. And so we have lost this cultural sense of connectedness in terms of really looking at a family system. And part of that is continually kind of propagated by this system that we have to operate in order to provide service to begin with, right? Because if you can't code family therapy, you've got to code something. And so oftentimes that means that we are dividing members of families and treating them in a certain way that is not congruent with how they see themselves, with how their community sees them. And it's actually creating more harm, I believe, in the long run. And so I think it's just really critical that we continue to build mental health professionals that know, honor, and can work with families, because I think we are constantly up against a model that is not congruent with that at all.
I pick up on a couple threads from something I heard you saying, Katrina and Sandra, for another question. We do therapy here, right? That's what we do. I'm a huge believer in therapy. I've done it. It works. I love it. And there are so many other healing practices that can help kids, parents, adults heal from whatever they've gone through and experienced. And as I was getting ready for the day, one of the things that struck me, in this room, the very first speaker that we had in the series was Dr. Henry Emmons. And he talked about healing practices that go beyond therapy. One of the sessions we did was with Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, who wrote The Deepest Well, right? The session we did together with Naz right here in this room last summer was with Resma Menachem. There are 5 things that those people all said when they talk about what are healing practices that anybody can do and that everybody needs to do to support your own mental health. Nutrition, sleep, exercise, some kind of mindfulness or prayer practice, and community and social connections. Those 5 things, you read any one of those books, talk to any experts, it comes back to those 5 practices over and over and over again. So there is so much that each of us can do as individuals to take better care of ourselves, that we can give to our children, to the kids that we work with in whatever setting that we're in. So we're getting short on time, but I want to throw that observation, that question out to the audience, if there's anything you want to share, and then also to the panel about what are those healing practices that we can do that are available and accessible to anybody. It's not something you have to go see a therapist to do. Anyone? Yeah.
Can I ask a question and a comment? My question is probably longer than 5 minutes. So you brought up so I'm a leader of K-5 building in North Minneapolis. And you brought up you just mentioned the parent or people mindfulness. So we did a women's retreat in March, and only women were invited, and they came with their young daughters. And so we did yoga and mindfulness. We had a nutritionist. But the comments when the women were laying down, which they didn't want to do at first, and the little girls were like, come on, Grandma, come on, Mom, let's go in and meditate. And after they were done meditating, we couldn't get the room clear. So we did it for about 20, 25 minutes. And often the comments were, I haven't had 20 minutes of quiet time in 18 years. And so when you think their lives are that revved up, that every single day. And so we thought that night, if just 1 or 2 of these families will go home and maybe continue practicing this mindfulness, we've made an impact. They got to do some color sheets after the massage. We couldn't clear them out of the building. They wanted to continue coloring. They wanted to continue doing the mindfulness because they said we never get that opportunity. And my question real quick, and I doubt it will get answered. Sandra, and I apologize, the gentleman next to you, I don't remember your name. Rudy? Thank you. you both talked about, Sandra, you talked about how in the Black race, for Black females, mental health is almost like a stigma. It's not talked about. And then Rudy, you talked about denial. So as a leader of a building who is all Black and brown children, any advice on how, because oftentimes we are the first to tell the families, your child may need some support. And if I'm a white female sitting in front of an African American female who doesn't really want to talk about that subject, what advice do you have to broach that subject? Because oftentimes we walk away thinking, and I'm going to be vulnerable here, saying they don't care, they're in denial, they don't get it. We know you have to have trust, we know we have to have a relationship, but any other words of advice how we approach that conversation? Because we feel a sense of urgency, and we know we have to go slow to go fast, but any advice on how you have those conversations when you know that's probably the very first time someone is trying to have that conversation about their child?
You call me into that situation, and I want to begin to ask you, what is the nature and the depth and the richness of your relationship with those parents? Because for me, if there's not been a conversation in one way or another about those who are racially privileged and those who are racially subjugated, that's the barrier that you're talking about needing to cross. I start by asking, what's the nature of your relationship with those parents? And I say to you, don't stop. Don't stop not trying to, don't do help, said differently, continue. But when those things come up for me in situations I'm dealing with, I have to go there. So that's the conversation that may be absent, because then you're seen as not an ally, a potential subjugator. We don't talk about that enough, you guys. I have high hopes for my younger folks, because they ain't going to let you get by without.
And what, you know, the work that Amy is doing, that there is a focus on relationships and understanding, leaning into talking about racialized trauma. And it is not just about little brown and Black kids who are broken and show up in a classroom, but it's about the adults who are also broken and trigger them, and they trigger the triggers that go back and forth. That's why I love the work that's happening. And I do want to stress relationships, because I was there that night. And I think that was the first time you all had that kind of women's holistic evening. And I saw the faces on the Black moms and daughters, and it was like, so all of the teachers were serving the parents, and it was like tablecloth and linen and flowers and like great food, and they felt loved and they felt respected. And when you love me and you respect me, you can tell me almost anything. You know, and so all night that night, they were, you know, you just heard them all over the place, like, we have to do this again. We just have to do this again. And you know, the first thing Amy, as a public school principal, has to say is, I don't have the money to do this again. and that, you know, I do want to get back to the systems. I'm on Health Partners Board of Directors, and one of the things that I constantly talk about is it has been a challenge trying to access care. So this gets to money, like what we're resourcing, right? And because where we spend our money is really what we say is important. And mental health has not risen to the top of America's agenda, and healthcare that I struggle with even find. So yes, we know that there are not a lot of therapists of color, right? Like that has to change. We got to like create a pipeline and not just lean on, oh, there, you know, this is Minnesota, well, you just know there isn't. But you know, when none of them, of the two that are in practice, I know there's more than two, but when they're not in your, what do you call that again? Network. When they're not in network, it's like, so, I mean, you like, right? We're like running all over town, like, man, and it's like, and as middle class people, we have the privilege of going out of network. You know, well, first of all, we're in a network, right? Like, first of all, like, let me not be blind to that. And, but, you know, so I want to, and I know, Amy, I was going to get back to you, that around getting that funded more. And for me, what the funding for you to do more of those was all about the relationship and the connection that I saw that was real in that room that night.
We'll have one. I think we have. We'll do two more quick questions. We're over a little bit of time, but that's yeah. Here you go, Val.
So I just wanted to talk a little bit about, as a woman who raised sons, and dealing in the court system with fathers. So Rudy, I appreciate the work that you do and all of and there are resources out there. But I do think that gender plays a role, and I feel like oftentimes and while we're talking about it, we're not really talking about it, and particularly in the family therapy, because everything, my son and his daughter, and really, he seems like a unicorn, or he's treated like he's a unicorn, and then he's also treated very much like, well, you're not really doing all of that. And so I think the conversation around fathers and men involved in mental health is a conversation that really needs to be amplified.
Panel, any quick thoughts about that?
Amen.
Right?
Amen.
And amen. We intentionally at NAS, and we love all parents, but we intentionally do something special when we have especially single dads, because they are shunned. I could tell a mom to call Hennepin County Crisis, and she would get, boom, this is what you need, boom, this is what you need, boom, this. I could tell a dad to do the exact same thing. He will call me back in about 5 minutes. I just couldn't get past the person that answered the phone. So there is something to be said about that. I don't know the answer, except that more agencies, I hope, would do more of, you're a single dad, we're going to wrap all the resources around you, and we're going to check on you until you tell us not to do it anymore, until it becomes something normal that happens. Right now, we look at dads involved as an abnormal thing. A dad shows up at parent-teacher conference, even we're like, whoa, told you to be here, right? That should be normal. We should be like, hey, how you doing? It's good to see you. Let me show you to your room. Yeah, celebrate, yeah. Instead, we're like, oh, and then that puts the black dad in particular on the defense. Like, what's happening in here, right?
I do have one thing around that, by the way. So I have 3 daughters, right? And never had, my husband is like our mascot. And we have and we got a male cat. We were like, there you go, honey. But we now have a young African American male living with us, right? And as a mother, I was used to girl depression. I wasn't used to black boy depression, which and black boys grow up to be black men, right? That police kill. And it's like when he's depressed, he looks mean, and he looks threatening, and he looks angry, and the baby is simply hurting, but it shows up like that. And it's like, and then that's, there is I'm coming to, and Rudy, I know you know this, but the toxic stress, the depression, it leads to the homicide. Girls cut themselves, boys cut another boy, right? And it's like, there is no coincidence to what we're seeing. And that plays out with the adult men. So this thing that you're talking about with the dads and the sons, and you want to talk about a group. So I know that the number has skyrocketed for African American boys, right? But that is not something that we are actually talking about or dealing with. We just label them, lock them up, shoot them, run from them.
As a plug, Northside Teen Zone has started a fathers empowerment group. That's dads. If they live in our area, please do have them call us.
And even if they don't, as long as their baby does.
As long as y'all heard it from our CEO.
All right, panel, we got one more question over here, and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you. I don't have a question, I have a comment. And let me say, may I shout out for Rudy? We go a long time, Lucas Wanga, and many days, many years. I'm a licensed psychologist in the state of Minnesota, a school psychologist, and I have no school. That's just a joke. What I want to say is that thanks for the panel, and this is wonderful. But what are we talking about? What disease are we talking about? Mental health? Oh. But where's the disease? Depression? What is that? I'm kind of sounding dumb and stupid because nobody knows what mind, mental, are you talking about? Am I suffering? Let me put it this way. Those who need it most are not here. And they don't know that they need it. And they don't know what we're talking about. If you're sick, you feel pain. And when you go to the doctor, you say, you know what? It's really here, right there. And the doctor starts from there. When you are mentally sick, do you feel pain? It's not related to the 5 senses that will tell you what it is. And usually it's the other person that says, what's wrong with you? And you look at him and he says, something's wrong with me? How did you notice that? It is a mental issue, is an issue that needs to be explained. To those who know what it is, please explain to us who suffer from it. We don't know what it is. The other little thing that I want to say is, other than we who need it most are never there, when you are explaining, the other piece is, what is mental, mind? I know about my body, but I don't know anything about my mind. And whatever happens to it is not my issue either. By the way, it's not anybody's issue because it's a stigma that nobody wants to know about. Don't tell me that I'm sick up there because that's my engine. Otherwise, then I don't belong. I will stop. The big story is I want to say something personal. 5 months ago, my son died of suicide. But that's not the issue. The issue was his siblings were always asking, what's wrong with you? Until he killed himself. Was it because nobody understood, or was it because he just wanted to kill himself? Did he know what he was suffering from, and did he know why he wanted to die? I think it is a responsibility of those of us that have spent years and years in books and in conferences and in understanding to explain what it is, other than what's wrong with you.
Would like to comment on that. Thank you, sir. Take 2 minutes, I think.
I wanted to say I miss you, Lucas. I miss you, Lucas. I still have his evaluation of my program 50,000 years ago. He did a qualitative evaluation of my program. Whenever I get into these situations, the most common sensation I have is impotence. I'm always overwhelmed by the massiveness of what we're being asked to address. But late in my life, my response to what are we talking about, I've tried to flip that with my brothers and sisters who are African descended and others, black and brown, to talk about they're worthy of being supported. They are precious. They are worth being a part of, being redeemed, and they have value for me and others. And that changes the conversation from why did you do that to can you tell me what's going on? And tonight I brought the idea that rage is a part of that. Years ago, it occurred to me that as a light-skinned black man who now honors his African descent, if I wasn't rageful, I wasn't fully alive. And how to manage that becomes very important for me, not being dead or in prison or in the cemetery. And so my conversations with those young brothers that you remember back in those times, Lucas, these young brothers were hearing messages that you are precious, you have value, and we're here to support you. And boy, was that an antidote for many of these kids. That must be a part of the therapy. Must be a part of therapy.
Other thoughts, folks?
I think Dr. Rudy could drop the mic.
I wouldn't dare.
I would just say that I'm really sorry for your loss, and I think you raise a perfectly legitimate question that we have to try to answer. I can only say from my own experiences, I see kids every day after they've tried to commit suicide. That's what I do for work. I go to an inpatient unit and talk to the kids after they've tried to commit suicide. And most commonly, and I do think there's some, that rage question is that frustration, that not being heard, not being seen, feeling, and being told they're worthless. I mean, it's just so, but what I always try to, what is optimistic, an optimistic note, is that 90% of the time they're glad they weren't successful. And they can get some help and see a different possibility. So that helps me with doing this kind of work.
A couple of thoughts I'd share with that really quickly is one thing I think we have to call bullshit on is this idea that there are crazy people and well people, or that you are mentally ill or you are mentally healthy. It's bullshit. Every one of us experiences the physical and emotional and thought symptoms of anxiety or depression. They come and they go, right? It's not you have it or you don't. We all have it and it comes and goes. What we need is help and support in understanding that. So I'm grateful that you brought that point up. And the other thing that I would say, one of the things that stood out to me from the work everyone on the panel is doing is exactly what we're talking about, is we have to find and reach kids and parents where they are. Too much of this whole system is designed to say, we're here, if you can get to us, we'll help you out. Everyone here is doing innovative work to meet families, work with kids in the schools, go out and meet with families in their homes. And the system doesn't support that. It isn't set up that way, but it's exactly how it should be done. Yeah. So there is so much we didn't get to tonight. We've already gone so late, and I'm so grateful that everyone stuck around. So thank you to everyone who helped put this event on. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to our panel. Please join us again. We will be doing this again in the fall, and everyone drive safe.